GM, welcome to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. Don't get caught in the hype cycle. I'm Jay Bird, and I believe that NFTs are going to change the world. That's why I'm here, carving a path for doers to confidently build and invest in Web3. Now, on today's show, we are asking the question, is the bottom of the NFT market finally here? Is the pain over, or is there more pain ahead? And we have joining us Gavin Purcell from Overpriced JPEGs, one of the best podcasts and newsletters in the NFT space, to break down the state of the market. We're going to talk about how, look, it's pretty bleak out there right now. Daily volumes, active wallets, sales are at an all-time low. Floors are hitting all-time lows, although it appears that they've bounced back a little bit from all-time lows. We got influencers leaving the space, but there's some things giving us hope that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about liquidity and how liquidity flows through the markets from Bitcoin to ETH to altcoins into things like Pepe and meme coins. And how does that eventually flow to NFTs? Where does that fit? We're going to talk about money flowing through markets outside of North America, in Asia and many parts of the world. There is money flowing through those areas. And there's also a continued interest in NFTs and in the future of this tech, not just in the investment financialization of NFTs. And then we're going to talk at the end, we're going to zoom out and talk about not just NFT investing, which there's lots of advice given from Gavin on how you should think about your NFTs and investing, but also we're going to talk about the future. Where does this go long term? Where do we see the opportunities now and then also down the road? And finally, we're going to wrap up. We're going to talk a little bit about Gavin's new podcast all about AI. AI for Humans, it's called. Great podcast. Gavin just brings a wealth of knowledge because Gavin originally came from TV and media, sort of pre-internet media. He was one of the producers on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show, where he was a big part of the rise of that show. He was employee number 2 there and really took that show to the top. And so he has seen how much media and culture has an impact on humanity and on trends. And there's such a tie-in with NFTs there. So he brings such a great perspective to today's show. Really excited for you guys to listen. But before we jump in, we just need to take a minute to hear from our sponsors.
The future of social media is here, and that future lives in Web3 on top of Lens protocol. Web2 social platforms are broken and ripe for disruption. You see, the epicenter of social media is the creators, and yet they are the most neglected. Web2 platforms like Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram are all essentially robbing creators of their worth. Creators are a new type of entrepreneur, forming new types of businesses. Yet with Web2 platforms, creators don't own their content or the profiles, and that's their product and business. Instead, they are tied to the platforms they choose to create on. Well, just like how crypto is freeing us from banks, Web3 is freeing us from these centralized platforms. On Lens protocol, creators own their content, own their profile, and even their social graph and followers in the form of NFTs. This allows you to move freely from one social application to another with your content, profile, and followers moving along with you. Lens protocol enables self-sovereignty for your social graph and interoperability across the internet. At Web3 Academy, we believe this is the future of social, and that's why we've partnered with Lens to ensure that the path of social media is heading in the right direction. Visit lens.xyz to learn more today.
What if I told you that industry pioneers from flagship Web3 brands such as Consensus, Polygon, Binance, Unstoppable Domains, Ledger, and Uniswap will all meet up in one place this summer? You don't want to miss this. I'm talking about the Epic Web3 Conference taking place in beautiful Lisbon on the 9th of June with over 20 curated talks, speed consultations with Web3 experts, networking sessions with investors, and even the opportunity to raise funds. This conference has it all, and you'll get the tools you need to succeed in this industry. Plus, we at Web3 Academy will attend and host a community meetup with you and the other smart community before the main event. So come along, meet us, network, and start building alongside leading Web3 innovators. We can't wait to meet you. Remember, Lisbon, Portugal, 9th of June. We've got a 15% discount for you, but ticket prices go up every few days, so get your tickets today by using the link in the show notes. Enter the promo code Web3Academy15 to secure your spot. Or if you become a pro member, you can get an even bigger discount. So go pro today, and we'll see you in Lisbon, Portugal on the 9th of June at the Epic Web3 Conference.
Gavin, what's going on, my man? Great to have you on the show, finally.
I know, this is exciting. It's been a while, Jay. We've known each other now for a bit here, and I'm excited. I always love chatting about both NFTs and overpriced JPEGs. They're one and the same in some ways, right?
We'll see where we come out at the end of the show, if they're NFTs or if they're just all overpriced. Let's start at the top. The most obvious question, title of the show. Do you think we're at the bottom of the NFT market?
Okay. I think there's a lot of things going on right now in the NFT market. So I work at Overpriced JPEGs with Carly Riley, and we write a pro newsletter every week, which is our subscription-based product. We just wrote a pretty long article about this. I think one of the signals that I've seen, and I think this is going to sound like kind of counterintuitive, but when you see major players in the capitulation stage, meaning that they either walk away or they get liquidated and they walk away, honestly, that's a good sign. And it's something I will say this as a first-person perspective. My basic story in NFTs is like January of 2021 is when I was first introduced to them. And I got very kind of feverish about them early on. And then I was in the middle of that OE meta that hit in like Nifty Gateway and all this stuff. And there was a giant crash, right? Like all that stuff went down. And I was like, well, this is it. I'm walking away, right? I'm walking away. And like this was a flash in the pan, like tulips and all that stuff was there. And I missed apes, cats, cyber Kongs, all the stuff that came in June and July.
Yeah.
Came back in August and got into like loot and anonymized, but like missed the really big moment, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that when you watch people in the space walking away or saying like, I'm done with NFTs or NFTs are over, that is a great sign for the people that are still here, because I think in the past, if you follow all through crypto history, these are the moments where people, if you stick through it, the opportunity exists. So I think are the NFTs at the bottom? I'm not sure, because we'll talk about a few of the things that have happened the last couple of days, but there's that. And then, the other thing that's so hard right now is there's so few people in this space that what happens is when something big in another world happens, say Pepe or one of these meme coins runs, all of the liquidity gets sucked out because there's just not enough people here. Again, it goes back to my feeling is like, if that sort of stuff is happening, we're in such a small number of people that are actually buying and trading these things that we have to be close to the bottom, right? That's kind of what I feel like. Who knows, right? This is the hard part. I think, if you ask somebody the same question 6 months ago, or let's say 9 months ago, before Luna, before FTX, they would have said like last May, there was the big moment in last May in NFTs where the other side kind of took a bunch of ETH out of the market, right? And this is when, Goblin Town launched around that time, and it was like this big moment, and everybody's like, oh, it's Goblin Town. I think most people would have told you that was the bottom, right? That would have said that was the bottom. We've seen two other bottoms since then. This is kind of sad to say, but like, it's almost when people have been beaten down so much that they're willing to walk away. That's when the bottom actually happens. And I do feel like we're there, if that makes sense.
The other signal to me, and we'll get into the different signals that you look at, and the inspiration for this show today came from an article that you and Carly wrote over at Overpriced JPEGs, asking the question, is the bottom in? And I reached out to you. I was like, we got to get you on the show to talk about this, Gavin, because everybody's wondering this. And there's a lot of fear. And when there's a lot of fear, typically that is a bottom signal. And so we'll get into that. But we recorded a show last week where we talked about crypto and how the crypto bottom is in. And we're actually, the crypto bottom is sort of past now. We're in this early phases of a bull run.
Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, that's why I say early phases of a bull run, because the early phases, it's choppy, it's up, it's down, but it's not down only. Anyways, and that's crypto. Then the question becomes, okay, so what about NFTs and where do NFTs fit? And so we'll get into that. I'm sort of jumping ahead. But before we do, you guys record a podcast every week. You're writing articles every week. How are you yourself feeling right now? And what are you hearing from others that you're talking to?
Yeah, so I think that we have this conversation every week on the Friday show of Overpriced JPEGs, where we kind of talk about the vibes, right? And I think...
vibes check.
Vibes check. And I think, the vibes for the people that are still here are okay. I would not say they're good. It's interesting. Zedeca, who comes on the show quite often, talks about like there's a lot of snippiness right now in the world of NFTs, right? There's a lot of people like angry at each other and being back and forth. And I think if you cannot be in that place, especially if you've been here for a while, right? I think there's different stages of people that have been here. Some people came in and they had the big ape run up and they had the cats and they've seen this thing and they had their big moment. They're like, oh, well, this is rough, but maybe I've seen it big. Other people came in and it's only been down, right? Like they maybe came in.
That's me.
Yeah. But if you came in like April of last year, right? Like every single thing from that point on after the other side felt like, you know, you had the things like Goblin Town and Wagdai and stuff like that. And you will have still things that hit, but you didn't have this feeling of like, it's all working right now. So I think vibe wise, the people that are left believe in the promise of what these things are. And I also think that there's two parts to this. The people who are left, some of them believe in the promise of what these things are. The other group of people who are left are traders that will never leave because there is always going to be now a market here, right? Like the thing people forget about is like penny stocks are still traded every single day. And I'm not putting NFTs and penny stocks together, but once you establish a market for something and there's any liquidity, it will get traded. And well, if there's a lot less liquidity, it will be a lot less opportunity and more people can get wrecked, but it will still get traded. So I think there are people who have learned how to trade NFTs as a thing, and those people are not going to go away. And I think we'll talk about this later, but as more people come back in, I think that will come back in a much larger way as well. So there's two different pathways. One is there's the people who really believe in the promise of what these could deliver from a utility standpoint. And then there's the traders. The people that are left, I think, are starting to feel like okay about things. I think there's still a question on timing. Like, you know, we talk about is the bottom in. There's things that are happening right now that I'm not 100% sure of. Like one of the things that's so different now versus used to be is we're in a very unfamiliar economic environment, right? Like we're in a very different world. Yes, macros all over the place. And no one really knows, right? Like there's this whole conversation of like, are we in a recession already? Have they called it a recession? When they call it a recession, is that better for the economy on our side? Because then it means we've turned a corner. All of that stuff wasn't the case in the original bull run. The original bull run, there's just a lot of people who had a lot of time on their hands and a lot of extra money because they were feeling flush from a lot of these people are tech company people, and the tech companies are also cutting people now too. So there's a lot of that going on as well.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. Okay. Before we jump into the state of the market and what's going on, I just want to take a moment to pause and get a bit of Gavin's story, because I think you and I met a few months ago. You've got a background in traditional TV media. You've worked with some huge celebrities, some huge stars, and now you're like a guy that I listen to every week talking NFTs. You know every project. Before you jump into your background, I need to know, are you also active on crypto as well and trading there, or is NFTs where the most of your portfolio and most of your crypto investments are?
Well, okay, so I will say that I don't have that many talents, but the one thing I've always been decent at is being able to like be super curious and then like absorb a bunch of information really fast, right? And so one of the weird things that when I got into Discord, which I'm pretty deep on, it allowed me to like access to a lot of other information really fast. And I try to suck some of that out. I have like 5 or 6 Discords that I kind of regularly visit and try to get information out of. What I loved about NFTs and what I think I understand better about NFTs is it's telling a story about what a project is, about what they're trying to do. Whereas with crypto or even with normal companies, they are telling a story as well, but it's not as important in some ways. It's much more math driven in some ways. I think when I think about like investing in math, and my background is a writer. I come from the creative side. There was something about NFTs that appealed to me about this idea of like, okay, they're all small businesses, but they're also built on community, art, and storytelling, most of them. And that's what I know, right? Like that's my background. So I feel like I've got a better take on that than I do on like what's the cap table or what's going to be the returns on this X number of company. I can see those gestating story companies or see those gestating IPs and understand, oh, this team gets it, or this is a really interesting play. I understand why this is working. Somebody described it once as cryptos for babies, basically. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, building blocks of crypto rather than it being like the giant architectural sets. And that makes sense to me because I get that aspect of it. And then there's all these other things that kind of go along that I can kind of get into.
It's the culture side.
Yes.
You're a culture guru, right?
That's
like
right.
You've been a purveyor of culture for your whole career. You've seen different trends rise and fall. You've worked at the bleeding edge of culture. So anyways, give us the background on Gavin.
The highlights are born in Seattle, Washington, and I was like in high school during grunge. I always think of that's an interesting time to grow up in Seattle, which is fun, right? But then I taught English in Korea, moved back to LA to kind of fall into the entertainment business. Wasn't really planning on it, but like moved to California originally to go to grad school for fiction writing, and then ended up falling into the entertainment business. Kind of farted around doing PA jobs, doing other stuff, and then landed at a company that was kind of a place that I pursued. But in 2002, a company got started in LA called G4 TV, which was a television channel before, when they still launched television channels, about video games. And I grew up a massive video gamer, still play a lot of games as much as I can, like, a nerd. I like to say, like, I'm in my, mid 40s, and like I was a nerd before being a nerd was something people said out loud. So like I grew up playing, PC games, Apple games, Sega Genesis, like all this, the old school stuff, and really kept with it all the way, like never left it. So being at G4 was pretty transformative for me because I was able to put my passion, something I cared about my whole life, into this media business. And so I kind of moved up pretty quickly there, and then got kind of lucky a couple of years in that I was part of a team. I was one of the co-creators of a show called Attack of the Show, which kind of grew out of a former show called The Screensavers. And weirdly, in this world, the two hosts of it were Kevin Rose, the Proof's Kevin Rose, and Kevin Pereira, who is my friend and now co-host of the podcast I'm doing on AI. But we started this show, and what it became about was digital culture, right? So it became a show with games laid in, but it was really the beginning stages of what was changing all of culture, right? The digital culture was changing. Like you saw viral videos starting to happen. You saw social media starting. It was really the Web 2.0 world, right? It was Web 2.0, and we were doing the cultural kind of side of that, along with comedy and all sorts of other weird tech stuff. Super fun job. Really enjoyed it. It got like to become kind of a cult hit. Like Kevin and Olivia Munn became the main hosts of it eventually. That show got decently popular. And then in 2008, I got a call, and the call was from Jimmy Fallon's office. And it was like, hey, Jimmy would like to meet with you about, he's going to be hosting late night in the future. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I mean, I kind of knew Jimmy at the time. Like they always talk about SNL, that if whenever you grew up, your SNL cast is the cast when you were in high school, right? And so when I was in high school, that was like Phil Hartman and John Lovitz and all those guys. Yeah. Jimmy, I kind of missed because I was in college at the time, while Jimmy was kind of ascending. But anyway, I met with him. I realized I wanted to bring some ideas to that meeting. So I was like, okay, I'll bring some ideas, but I don't really want this job. It was a funny thing. I don't even want this job because I really loved the Attack of the Show at the time. So I wrote up a bunch of stuff, and it turned out that he and I got along really well. Jimmy also was very nerdy, was a C++ major in college. Like he was a programming major. Like, yeah, he was a computer programming major before he dropped out. And we had a similar vision of what this could be. And so like, weirdly enough, a week later, I got a call from Lorne Michaels' office. They flew me out to LA to meet with Lorne. And then 3 weeks later, my wife and my 2 young kids, we were living in Brooklyn. Like it was that fast, right? So I went from living in LA, and my whole life got kind of upended. And then I was there for 8 years. I saw the show kind of from the beginning, the very beginning stages. I was employee like number 2, and I was a producer, writer on it, and I kind of raised with it, and we launched the Tonight Show out of it, and then this thing happened there. So it was like, and along the way in that way, one of the things that I kind of added was my media background. Also, my digital stuff came in, and we did a lot of stuff. Jimmy became very big on Twitter. We did a lot of interactive stuff on the show. We brought games onto the show. We brought technology onto the show. All the stuff that I cared about, I was able to bring that into the show itself and kind of help it kind of like level up to the next stage. Left there because I wanted to try something different. Went to a company called Vox Media, which is like, Verge and all those companies. Ran video for them for a while as across the whole company, which was super interesting. And then worked with Sarah Silverman on a show. I ran a show for Sarah Silverman in LA. I left that job to go run that show in LA, which was super fun. That was in the middle of all the political craziness of the Trump world, and that was interesting. And then left that show because Sarah's show got canceled. Unfortunately, it was a great show, but didn't succeed in the way that we had hoped, but got canceled. And so I went on to what's called an overall deal with NBC. I came back to the Tonight Show to run it for a year to kind of like bridge them between different people. Like I wasn't planning on going back like forever and ever, but I went back and ran it. And during that time I was running it, COVID happened, right? So like it was this experience of like, what's it like to do it at the Tonight Show where Jimmy's at home with his kids and all that stuff and learning all that stuff. Sorry, cut to a year from that. I did that for a year, left in November of 2020, and was kind of like trying to figure out what my next thing was, right? Because I was like, okay, I did this for a year. I'm trying to figure out what my next thing is. Like I was thinking about maybe I'll go into like VC at some point. I was thinking about, I had a podcast I was doing that I really liked just as an experiment. And then, I got hit with this bug. Brian Brinkman, my friend Brian Brinkman, who's a really big artist in the NFT space, was our graphics artist at Fallon. And he was like, I had seen him talking about NFTs. I was like, what are these things? And he kind of explained them to me. And then Jonathan Mann, who's another guy, who's the Song a Day Man guy, he was my intern at G4, and I asked him about it. And he was like, oh, you could check out this. And he was the one who first set me up on OpenSea and like sold me one of his Song a Days like in January of that year. Yeah, it's funny. That was like one of my first NFTs was I bought Jonathan's Song a Day like in January, second week of January, like right after the insurrection. I remember it very well.
Yeah.
Then like I said, I kind of like farted around for a while, didn't really fully commit, kind of folded out, moved back to LA, all sorts of life stuff happened. And then I weirdly got sucked into the world of like shit coins during kind of DeFi summer, which was a mistake, but I got into it and then saw Loot and a couple other things. And I knew Andy Milonakis, Andy Milonakis, the TV guy. So Andy Milonakis was like a TV show host on MTV for a while. He's a very funny comedian, but he and I knew each other a little bit over Twitter. And so I saw him starting to talk about this stuff on his Twitter handle, and I started talking about it too. And like we DM'd about a bunch of stuff. And then Andy sent me one day, this was like in maybe early September, he's like, hey, you should check out this project Anonymize. And I was like, okay, great, I'll check out this project. And I got into it and I was like, well, this is really cool. And I dove in and I was like, the people are really cool. It's a lot of punk holders or people that were really smart. Mm-hmm. And I started to kind of get the system of what was interesting about community around NFTs, and then also what was interesting about the trading side of NFTs, because these were very smart trader people, right? And the thing about Anonymize, which I always laugh about, is talk about holding bags, right? I bought these I have two of them that I bought for like one for 0.25 ETH and one for like, I think 1.15 ETH. And the big thing about Anonymous at the time was they're on chain, really cool. All the art exists on chain. You could re-roll them, do all this really interesting, innovative stuff. They ran up to like 15 ETH really fast, like 3 weeks. And I always tell people like, I thought I was a fucking genius. I thought I was like, this is my new job. I'm going to do this forever. Because like I could just make, $25,000 on this in 2 weeks. What the hell? Why wouldn't I do this? So I ran up and then they ran back down, as everything does in this space, and it got the bug inside me, right? And the bug, I will say this, the bug is, the last thing on my story is, I'm always trying to figure out how much of the bug, I think this is an important thing for everybody to listen to, how much of the bug is actually what's interesting about this stuff, which there is a lot, versus the idea of the dopamine of gambling, right? Because that is part of what this space is too. And I think people have to remember that, especially if you're starting to feel yourself get kind of either super feverish or super down. You don't want to allow that part of this space to kind of like penetrate your soul, right? And that's something that I think over time, you get better at. I was talking to a guy at a Discord, in the Mice Discord the other day, about how I miss Pepe. I saw it run up. I actually had some queued up. I was going to buy it. It's like, I don't know if I want to fucking throw money away at this shitcoin again. And it's now, whatever I put in was probably worth like 200 ETH, right? Which is kind of crazy what I would have put it at the time, which is insane. I used to feel so terrible about that, right? Like I used to feel this place where I was like, oh my God, can you imagine what that would have been like? I could have done X, Y, and Z. And now I've gotten to the place where like, you miss stuff, right? Like you have to have that more kind of like even keeled thing, or else you will get ground down internally. And I think that's one of the biggest things I want to get across to people. Is like, if you're ever feeling like you're grounding yourself down internally, it's not worth it. It really isn't worth it. This is gambling at its heart. Do you know what I mean? Yes. It's fascinating and world. It's awesome, but like, don't let your mental health get damaged because you're chasing something that may never come.
I want to do another show where we just talk about Jimmy Fallon and what it was to work with him. I can only...
he's the best. He's super cool. I'm still friends with him, and he's a great guy.
That's awesome. Yeah. But I think you make a great point and we're going to talk about this at the end of the episode, but I'm just going to tease it right now, is I do think, you and I have decided to put our careers into Web3 and NFTs being a big part of Web3 because we believe that this is world-changing technology. Yeah. Not because we believe that the NFT market is going to make us millionaires. There's this like interesting dichotomy where you kind of get stuck on, oh, am I here because I believe in the future of the tech, or am I here because I try to make a bunch of money and I'm gambling? And you can get very sucked into the gambling side because that's where all the emotions are. Yeah. And especially at lows like we are right now, there's not as many new projects coming out. There's not as much talk about, the life-changing tech. You look at the numbers and it's not daily active wallets isn't showing an increase. It's showing a decrease. Yeah. Like all-time lows. So yeah, I think you make a really good point. Let's actually lead into that. So what are you seeing as sort of the state of the market today, and I mean, it changes so fast. So actually, there might be some things like blend
That happened just recently,
today versus a week ago when you guys wrote this article on OpenJ Pro.
I mean, so a couple things are interesting right now. I think that one of the biggest things to feel okay about is that there's still money in the system. And when I say the system, I mean like the kind of crypto world is here, and like the money, what you mentioned earlier is like we're seeing a little bit of bounce in crypto, right? Which is a good thing, which means that like it's not only down in the crypto world. The funnel that we talked about briefly at the top has always been this kind of theory, and it's not been proven per se, but it's like, okay, Bitcoin goes, and then the alts, which Ethereum is included in the alts, they go, and a little bit Bitcoin comes down. Then like there's a shitcoin run, and then there's kind of like an NFT run. And NFTs always kind of end at the end of it. The hardest thing about NFTs always is, and people say this, is like ETH go up, NFTs go down, ETH go down, NFTs go down, ETH goes flat, NFTs go up, maybe, right? This is like the world, that you're lucky to be in. The thing I think it's really important to know is that, like, again, going back to Pepe, you're looking at something that went from a zero market cap, $0, to a now I think 500 million plus market cap in the course of 3 weeks, right? So the money exists, and in a lot of ways, we have to be encouraged about the NFT world. And again, this goes back to what you're saying about the separating from the people interested in the tech and the traders of this. You have to be happy that a lot of that money ended up in people's hands who are exposed to NFTs and understand what NFTs are, right? Because there's a world where if I'm somebody who was lucked out and put 0.25 into Pepe when it was like whatever, 250,000 market cap, and suddenly I have 500 ETH on my hands, am I going to put 400 of that away and be like, okay, I learned my lesson? Sure. But then I'm going to take 100 of that and be like, okay, time to go back to the casino and try to put some down, right? Like, because that's part of what you do and try to build your gains. So that's one thing that's encouraging, is that the money is still in the system. No one has left. People have left. I shouldn't say people haven't left, because people have left, but there is money in the system still. I think the other thing that's interesting to look at is a couple projects that have still come on very strong. And I think, we have Azuki and Memeland are both really interesting. And one of the things we pointed out in that article is that the Asian markets are much stronger than you would expect, knowing where we are in the Western markets, right? And I think it's in part because I don't know exactly what this is. It might.
Do you mean, just to be clear, do you mean Asian markets as a whole, or do you mean Asian crypto or Asian NFT markets?
I mean Asian crypto and NFT markets. And I think this has to do in part with like there's a little bit of more fear on our side about regulation and what that means, especially after the FTX thing, right? But I think in Asia, at least in Hong Kong and in Japan, there's been signs that they're going to be a little more crypto positive. And I think that you see projects that, like, this is the hard thing to know exactly for sure, but like you have Memeland, which is Ray Chan, who's based in Hong Kong, and you have Azuki, which is obviously an American project, but like has broad appeal in Asia because it's an anime project as well. Both of those projects are up over the last like 30 days versus like almost everything else is down, right? When you think about Apes or you think of all the other larger projects, but Memeland is up like 40% across Captains and Potatoes, and Azuki is up, I think, like 25%, right? Like they're both held. So that's encouraging. It's not like every single project is down. Now, I will say this, the tricky thing is we have so few people in this space right now that when all the money rushes into one thing, and right now say it's Pepe, and like 2 weeks ago was Nakamigos, right? Nakamigos was the project. It went from like, again, free, and I think it peaked at like almost an ETH, right? Like, so there's 20,000 of them. So that's a lot of people in one project to get to an ETH, right? What happens if it moves to something else a lot of the time is those people all go out, and then suddenly that project Nakamigos is at like 0.25 ETH now, right? So it went on this big peak and run. Captains and Azuki have held and gone up during that time. So that shows you that there's some strength there, right? So I think that's an encouraging thing in the NFT market. We're entering this kind of like shakeout period where like you're seeing like who are the people that are serious about this? What does it mean to be serious? What does it mean to try to create a longer term brand in this space? And, I think Proof has obviously had some struggles lately, especially, after their last kind of like I think they're on the right trajectory. Proof's on the right trajectory with it.
You think so? Thing. Okay. I'm wearing my Moonbird shirt right now.
I have a Moonbird too, and
I'm a holder, but
I've lost a lot of money on Moonbirds. Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. I thought they were on a great track, and I think the bummer to me is they really didn't need the thing that just happened to them, right? Like they didn't need the problem with the diamond thing, and I think that made a lot of people mad because it was like, oh, I can buy back into Proof that this, I'm not physically buy, but I buy back into the idea of what they're trying to do, and I believe that pathway that Kevin has laid out and those guys have laid out is smart. I believe that like focusing on art is a really good thing, and I was more than happy to like get a free awesome NFT of an artist from that drop. I think the problem is when you screw something up that you've already been seen as somebody who has screwed things up in the past, it kind of compounds and it looks worse, right? So that's bad. But another project like this is Doodles, who were really down bad, right? Like, and I think a lot of the general consensus around Doodles is like, oh, those guys, they don't know what they're doing. That said, like Carly, I know, is very positive on Doodles and has kind of like turned me a little bit on them as well too. They are doing really interesting stuff. They own an incredible animation studio now, which like, that's a big move in this space, right? Like when you have that sort of thing, their partnership with Pharrell is real and it's there. And I think they're getting way better community. So like there's projects that even look like they were kind of like dead. No, and I don't mean dead. They look like they were just going to grind down to zero. Even those projects feel like they're starting to show little sprouts of hope out of them, right? And I think this is a good sign. I will still say my overall theory about NFTs is, especially when you're trying to trade them, there's going to be like 5 that will work over the long term. And when I say long term, I mean over years, 2 years, rather than 10 or 20. There's going to be lots of opportunities to find new things along the way, right? Like it's really hard to kind of resurrect a bag from before. Like I think there's a project called Threelanders. Do you know Threelanders? Do you know that?
Yeah, I remember. That's a great project. I like
Great
that
project. Super cute. The art was great. I don't ever see that coming back. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like you're just going to have a really hard time with projects like that returning from a kind of chaos and purgatory that they were in, because it takes so much more lift to get you out of that than it would be to launch something new, right? Which is the tricky thing in this space.
You kind of are getting into what I have found from direct experience of buying the top of NFTs is like you, I'm not a math guy.
Yeah.
I was never excited about investing. The only investments that I've ever been excited about have been more private investments in like my friends' businesses and things like that. That felt more meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, you could argue those are the worst possible investments because those are
High risk.
High reward, right?
Yeah.
Very high risk.
Yeah.
So my feeling now is, this is the analogy I like to use. Investing in NFTs is like investing in a business at the start of the internet. And you're picking one business, right? Or maybe you're investing in a few, but you're picking what you think is going to be the next Shopify or
You hope it's not the next PetSmart or whatever. Yeah.
That's the thing. PetSmart's the best example, right? Like, whereas investing in blockchains is the equivalent of investing in the internet as a whole, right? So it's becoming very hard for me to like logically spend money on NFTs when blockchains feel much more stable and long-term. And I don't need to know what use case is going to go on blockchain. I don't need to know whether it's going to be DeFi or it's going to be, it doesn't matter. I just need to know that there's going to be billions of people on chain. And as long as you have enough chains, probably a few of them are going to go. I think we all know the ones that are going to likely make it.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it's not fun to invest in blockchain. It's like there's no
story, really. The story's
there's no story. I can't print it and put it on. I can't use it in my PFP. You know, there's no culture behind it. There's no emotional attachment, which is probably why I'm bad at investing, because I'd make it emotional. Yeah, it makes it difficult. But at the same time, like, I won't lie, I saw your Nakamigos article and I was like, shit, like Gavin makes Nakamigos sound very exciting.
I have to say, like, when I wrote that article, I was like, this feels like something. And the funniest thing is, and I don't regret it because that's what I was thinking at the time. The fact is they've gone down from, when I wrote that article, it was like 0.65 down to 0.25, right? And you're just like, well, I guess it's just another project that people are just going to bail on when they don't get into it. Like, that's the frustrating part, right? And I think the fun time of NFTs were, like, going back to Threelanders, like, Threelanders got to, like, over an ETH, right? And this is a small project from an artist, and it felt like, but there were, like, 40 projects over an ETH right then. Do you know what I mean? Like, there were so many, but you had, like, MFers were over an ETH, all these projects that were really crushing at the time. And when you're in the middle of all that, everybody feels like they can win. It feels like, oh, there's an opportunity for all of us to kind of come up. And now it feels like, oh, there's this one pathway where things are going to work. And then if you don't get out in time, you're kind of screwed. And then slowly what happens is you chip away at your investment stack. And then you look at yourself and you're like, well, how did I just spend, 10 ETH over the course of a month? And it's gone because, like, it's all this garbage you have in your thing. So, like, that's where it can be really tricky. And I think when you think about investing in NFTs, it's okay right now to wait, right? I think don't walk away. The one break I took in the last, like, year and a half, I missed Digidaigaku, right? Which Digidaigaku, I was in the mix of people who knew that thing, and that went from like, again, 0 to 12 ETH, and then it kicked off a bunch of other stuff. There will always be opportunities, no matter what the market looks like. So don't walk away, but like also, it's okay not to try to get into everything. That's the other thing. It's important to know. It's like, it's okay to go for like a few days without trying to get a win, because if the wins are fewer and farther between, you might be better served by kind of waiting for a second. Like one dumb, like kind of investment note I took over the course of the last year, which a couple of smart people, friends of mine who were investors, is like, don't mint anything right now. Like don't mint, because like the minting value was always about if something's going to run up super fast, having a mint and then maybe getting a rare from minting is valuable. What you should always do now is just wait to see if the thing's going to take off at all, because 95% of projects when they mint out go down and then maybe they come back up if you're lucky. But it used to be in the old days, like if you didn't get in on something, you were suddenly at it went to 2 or 5x before you had a chance to buy it in secondary. Yeah. But now it's like minting almost feels like just wait.
It's such great advice. And because that connects to the sentiment of the market.
Yes.
And this is what gets people trapped. It's the famous Warren Buffett quote, right?
Yeah.
Buy the fear, sell the greed. It's so tough to do that.
Yeah. That's what you got to do. And you have to go against your own human nature for it. Right?
Yeah.
In some ways. Yeah.
You're completely against, right? Whereas in the middle of a bull run, when everything's popping, that's when FOMO sets in. And that's when you feel like you're missing out. When everyone's saying that it's bad is when you actually should be sticking around and being in it. And you mentioned like liquidity is good. And from a macro, if you listen to our podcast from last week, from a macro perspective, liquidity is actually very good, because the Asian market started printing money, like China was printing, Japan put it in some new program in the last like quarter. The US is already printing money to save all these banks and likely printing more. So from like liquidity is good on a macro level. And then as you said, within crypto, liquidity is good. We're just seeing it move around between different coins. And obviously Pepe took off, and then Herald, Wojak, there were so many there. And I was like, what is going on? So liquidity is good. NFTs are at the bottom of the funnel. It clearly hasn't funneled down yet. While that's not a proven theory, that makes a ton of sense.
Feels like it, right? Yeah, I've seen it happen before, right? Like it's tangentially, I've seen it happen before.
Especially with new people, I think, because like you come into the space by grabbing some ETH or grabbing some Bitcoin. It's fun and it's exciting, but then pretty quickly you're like, it's not really that much. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I could turn this ETH into an NFT. Like that funnel makes sense. I think we're at the point of no more down only, but then yesterday, and things are happening right now. And we're recording this about a week before we launch this, so things might even happen in the
Who
next
knows?
week.
Yeah, exactly.
I think let's take a step back. So I think we both believe the plan right now should be, because we all need a plan. You got to take a breather right now.
Yeah.
Don't FOMO into anything, but don't leave either. Don't rage quit. Who is the influencer who just rage quit a couple weeks ago?
I think it's Maki Big Brother. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the plan right now, but let's take a step back. I think the reason a lot of us are here is because we just believe long-term in the tech. And this is so I'm curious. I know you said before we record that you have a take on this of like, and I'm trying to figure out my own take on this so right now, I'm fairly confident in a lot of the stats, A16Zs, you can tell I'm a Canadian A16Z instead
of course, I didn't think it was weird. That's why I married two Canadian.
Well, your wife's Canadian, so
exactly.
So their recent crypto report projects, and most strong projections show we should be at 1 billion people on chain by 2030.
Where are we at right now? Did they say like, what is that?
Right now, we're at about 300 million.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So
here, basically 3x, 5x or whatever. Yeah.
So that is likely going to happen. Now, where does this position us in terms of, you've got this pro trader market and Blur is just going after it. And maybe we talk a little bit about Blend, the new product they just announced. And then you've got everyone else. And so what I'm wondering is, when so many new people come into the space, there's going to be another 700 million people that come into the space. How many of them are going to be pro traders? How many of them are going to be just going to be everyone else? All boats going to rise with the tide and we'll all succeed?
There's two things about this. One is, I think that we will get there. I think A16Z is right about this stuff going forward. Gaming is going to bring a lot of people on board. I'm a big positive believer that gaming is going to onboard a lot of people. I also believe we're just going to see people come back into NFTs. I think one of the biggest things we have to figure out, I know There's a lot of people trying to figure this out, is how to better do wallets and how better to do security. If I was ever in a situation where I could go into Bodega and use my touch to buy a coffee, and when I went to go touch my thing, if there was a chance that all of the money in my wallet could disappear because it was hacked, I would never, ever, ever use touch to pay. Somewhere along the way, there's got to be a fix on that. We have to have better security. And if that means better regulation, I'm actually all for it. Like I said this before, like in some ways, regulation can be helpful in that way. And we have to really be careful about how we kind of focus on it. But like, people have to feel that the money they own is not going to get stolen from them because they clicked on some bad link, right? Like, this is something that's really important. Assuming all this works, that we get better wallets, we get more people on, we get to 1 billion people. My take on this is going back to what I said about the penny traders. If you onboard that many more people into the space, and I saw this, I think, very specifically when the Donald Trump NFT launched, was a good weird example about this. No matter what, there will be a small percentage of those people who will see a door to a casino. They will open it and they'll be like, what's this? There's a chance for me to play this game as a game, because that's what it is, right? And they'll see that. So I believe on a pro trader level, if you onboard that many more people, you're going to bring a lot more money and you're going to bring a lot more trading action, is the best case scenario. You know, it's like, I think the one thing I would say about is casino gambling, like, so is the stock markets. These are people whose lives are built around versions of gambling, right? Hedge fund traders are essentially gamblers at a very high level. So as you onboard more people, I think that pro trader group will grow. But I hope, and I think this is, you and I are coming from the same place, that there's also this world, and I think it's probably going to happen at a much smaller price point. I think you're going to have NFTs that are from $5 to $25 that maybe go, and maybe you're lucky. It's almost like those little toys called the pop whatevers. You know what I mean? They really be, they become collectibles, right? When you think about, like, when you were a kid, I used to collect comic books, right? And if I had a comic book that was worth like $25, that was like a big deal, right? And I bought it for like 65 cents or something like that. That's the kind of levels you'll see this kind of collectability happen at for the masses. But some of those people, like, so in the version of the Trump thing, when Trump minted his NFTs, it's the funniest things. I did this dumb NFT myself. I created called Old Men with White Beards, which was this very like strange AI project I did because I wanted to try to do a project from start to finish by myself. I saw one guy buy an old man with white beard, and I went to his wallet, and all he had, and by the way, I hope this isn't about like connecting me to the Trump NFT, because it's not, but all he had in his wallet was the Trump NFT and like 2 other things that had come out that day. And I think what was interesting is, this is clearly in my mind, and this is a kind of guessing at this, but like, this is a person who had never done NFTs and tried it, was like, wow, this is interesting. I can go buy something else with this Ethereum or this money, you know, he might've bought it on his credit card, but then he could sell it for Ethereum, and then suddenly he's onboarded. So I think my take on this is, the onboarding is going to happen at that $5 to $25 level. But what's going to happen is some of those people will see the $1,000 plus level, which is where a lot of the real action happens at, and they'll get into that game and they'll see it, and they'll either get good at it and shoot up, or they'll not and they'll fall off. But the larger exposure to the entire marketplace is going to bring more people into all sections of it. But I think my gut is saying is that the majority of the growth is going to come at this lower level where people are going to play at a much cheaper space, if that makes sense.
I think even just free NFTs, right? Like Starbucks, who knows when that comes to being launched, and it's still like in like closed right now. All the Web3 social lens, all the free NFTs that are constantly being minted there. NFTs are a wrapper for everything digital, just to prove ownership and prove, you know, authenticity. And there's so much in that. I think I really framed my thinking around Moonbirds, because I bought my Moonbird for 8.5 ETH when ETH was like 30,000 at the time. Right? Maybe a little bit less than that, but I round up so I make myself feel worse. And I didn't know that they were going to be a art collector's PFP at the time, right? And so that's the thing. You got to know, when you're investing in a project early on, you're investing in a business. Do you understand the business plan, and do you believe in the business plan? And businesses change and they pivot. And really, I was investing in Kevin Rose. I just believed in him. But now I'm sitting here looking at it, and I agree with what you're saying. There's going to be a small fraction of pro traders. And I know that somewhere in Blur's deck, for sure, they are like, look at Bloomberg. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's Bloomberg, this entire software and machine that manages all pro traders on all equities and stocks and commodities in the current markets that are currently financialized and you can trade. Well, they're saying, okay, that needs to happen for NFTs. And I think there's going to be institutions investing in NFTs and all of that. I think the part that I get caught up on is the ones that I am invested, like Moonbirds. It's this question of, do I believe that they can create a business where my membership to that business is $30,000, right? It's definitely possible. Like I look at, I'm sure you're part of communities where you have great value from that community and you're thinking, oh yeah, I'd pay a lot of money to be in this. Others would pay a lot of money to be in this. And if there's scarcity, which there is in NFTs, then you can create a lot of value.
Well, I would say I would put it back to what something you said before, which I think is really interesting is, and I don't mean this is nothing against Moonbirds, because again, I'm a holder and I actually am a big believer in what they're trying to do. In the 1998, did you buy the Amazon or did you buy the pets.com? I'm not saying that Moonbirds is pets.com, but like there were 4 or 5 companies that survived that in a major way that still survive, like eBay, Amazon, Yahoo, like even Yahoo kind of fell off, but like what we might have just seen is like the first stage. And like, it might be that there's burnout. This goes back to what I was saying before, even about Freelanders. It's like, it's going to be hard for companies to change their own narrative and to come back versus all the other new stuff that's going to be coming down the pipe, right? Like this is where we're in a situation where lots of projects, I'm sure right now, are gestating. Like there's lots of big name projects that are just like chilling for a bit because the market's so bad. When we turn it back on, you're going to see all new things take off, and you're going to have these older projects like Birds or Doodles or these things that are like 2 to 5 range that were in the 10, 15, 20, 30 range, 35 range, you know. Are they ever going to get back there? I can't tell you that because I don't know. Like that's a slog. Like it's always harder to come back from a hole to dig yourself back up than it is to start from scratch, which is where like, you know, Zagabond, who is in charge of Azuki's, we know his history, right? Like he tried a couple other projects before and he came out and said it. And like part of the value of starting a project fresh as an anon, but I'm not a believer in that, by the way. My big thing is when I came into this world, I came in as an anon because I wanted to try and see what it is. But like everybody along every step along the way has known me as Funky Dog, right? That's not like I'm ever trying to put on a different thing. But like part of the value of starting a new thing, even for people who like want to do something new, who have a project that didn't work, you have a much fresher start at narrative. You have a fresher start at team. You have a fresher start at IP, all the stuff you might have made mistakes on. The issue is in the past for us now as holders of Moonbirds, if Kevin Rose were to say like, I screwed up with Moonbirds, I'm not saying he's going to do this, but he's like, I screwed up with Moonbirds, I got to go do something else and start from scratch. So many people have invested so much time and so many like actual dollars in the thing that you would not be able to go do that very easily, right? Like the risks are very high that you get kind of like one shot at a project of that size. And if it doesn't work, you're really just going to be digging yourself out of that for a while. So I think that's what I would say to you is like, as a Moonbirds holder as well, I believe that Kevin is smart. I believe that that team is well-funded. I believe that they have a long-term vision of stuff. Is it going to be hard to dig out of a place where they are coming a little bit out of a hole? Yes, because there's going to be more and more projects coming down the pipe that will take attention, that will take funding, that will take all this stuff, and that's the trickiest thing.
Just mentioning that you don't love anon teams makes me think of Nakamigos, because Nakamigos is an anon team, right?
Yeah.
I've got to bring it up just because you've gone so deep on the project. So tell us a little bit about Nakamigos.
Okay, so I will say this. I don't mind anonymous teams, but the reason why I didn't mind it with the Nakamigos is because it felt like they were doing it right? Like in this, when I say, let me explain what that means in my mind from somebody who's watched a lot of projects. And I had a project myself that I launched called Sheet Fighter in February of last year. So like I know the process of launching a project. And if you ever want to read something very long, everybody's listening, I wrote a 37-page article in October of last year doxing myself, which gave my entire history in the space, plus the Sheet Fighter history, plus all this other stuff. So I have a lot of thoughts in that, but if you ever want to spend 6 hours reading something, go read it. Nakamigos was interesting because, okay, my take is this. First of all, they came out of the box without promises at all, right? Because I think there's 2 different ways you can approach NFTs. One is you can come out and say like, okay, we are an IP company. We are growing for the future. We are going to make this thing into something that you can't believe. We got movies, we got cartoons, we got to do this thing. That's one way you say we're a business. Nakamigos came out and they were like, we're a NFT, we're art, or we're not promising anything. And like, there's this kind of like cliche in the space now of like, you know, no roadmap, no promises, but like, then you're really relying on, okay, who's your original holders? Who's buying in? What do you look like? What is the community form around it? And it's all organic, or at least, semi-organic, because there's with Nakamigos, there's some thought that maybe they had Satoshi, the guy that was like the guy that started MFers, or as part of like the kind of, whether he was part of the team or not, he was the one that kind of like was involved early on. But so my feeling is the cool thing about watching that as somebody from afar who's looked at all these NFT projects is it felt like what the original inspiration by CryptoPunks was. And I'm not saying that Nakamigos is CryptoPunks or anything, but they're both pixel projects. They were very like not actively shilling themselves, right? The project itself, and it came from a group of people that clearly knew what they were doing, but were not out here promising the moon. They were not saying to anybody, we're going to be Disney of 2025. So to me, it was kind of a throwback to these old NFT ideals, which is like, okay, PFP's identity is an important thing, but that only comes from if you build a community around the thing that feels like it's significant, and all that stuff felt organic. And then, what the interesting thing is, we talked about is like, it all felt organic, and then momentum shifted and people just went to the next shiny thing, right? Now, that said, the fact that holding a 0.25 floor at this point means there is a pretty significant holder base there. It's not gone to zero, but maybe that's not enough anymore, right? And this is the interesting thing to think about, is that like, if you're going to do that as a kind of a project, put it out there into the world, great. But as a buyer, don't expect them to like go up forever, first of all. So you have to be aware, if you love the art and you want to rep it and you love the community, that is the purest, most awesome form of NFTs, right? I think you talked about this too, Jay. It's like, I love the idea when an NFT project coalesces and you see the whole timeline's got people that are using their PFP and they're making memes. Like, that's what this is about. It's about fun and it's about that. They were not attempting to make a business. And maybe that's the world we're in now, where if you're not, the chance of you holding on for a while is much more difficult versus before, where it felt like there was more money in the space and you could kind of hold on to that. So when you're thinking about them as an investment, it's a little bit trickier way to look at it, right? Like, I even think like out of that article I wrote, I was like, I own one Nakamigo, and I was considering buying more because like, I believe that I wrote this stuff. Is really interesting. And then, narratives shift and it just changed a little bit. And it's not like it changed drastically, but it changed enough where it made me start to think of like, gosh, maybe they're just, the space for these projects as long-term things, that they just don't have the power in the way that they had maybe, a year ago or a year and a half ago. And maybe also there can only be one Punks. You know what I mean? I think that's the other thing. There's like one project that can have that narrative, and maybe it's just that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Keeping on top of this stuff is impossible for us. I'm in it, you're in it, and it's so hard to keep on top of. But you guys do such a great job over at Overpriced JPEGs, and I just want to give you a chance to talk about Overpriced JPEGs Pro, the premium product that you've launched recently. And I know that's where this article that we mentioned came from, as well as the index that you guys are releasing now of the top projects, which I've really been enjoying reading.
Yeah, so Overpriced Pro is a weekly newsletter that's a paid newsletter. We have a free newsletter that you could definitely sign up for as well, which is 140,000 subscribers, which gets you a couple newsletters a week. The paid product gets you this other piece, which is really deep research on specific things. Like, we did a big, long thing on Nakamigos, this piece that Carly really focused on about the bottom and going in. We have a full-time researcher that works with us on it. So like, it's something we do a lot of deep research on. And then the NFT index you mentioned is monthly. We have a group of people together, we call the council, the NFT council, who like, we poll for what they think the biggest projects are in the space. And we always think about them as are they trying to be a business first? So these are not like punks. This is more like Yuga, Doodles, Azuki, Milan, all the big projects, and we kind of rank them based on how our council thinks they are sitting in the space. So we're getting all of them to ask. And so we get a really interesting cross-section of how things move and what they go up and down. Like, an interesting example is like, we've done 2 of these now. The first one, Digi Daigaku, was like number 6. And people were like, well, this is an interesting project. They had this Super Bowl ad, but it was just after the Super Bowl ad. The next month it had fallen off the top 10. And it's like, that happens, and you can watch how stuff trades. So for us, the OPJ Pro newsletter was always about like delivering deep information about the space to people that really care about it. The other thing we're folding into right now is some access. And when I say access, I mean access to our knowledge base. So this week, actually, this will probably air after it comes out, but we're going to do our first like AMA with our Pro subscribers. So basically, we're going to have Carly and myself be on an AMA with them and hear from them, not only about the Pro subscription and questions about it, but really about the market and like having a direct access to what it means like to be part of it and following the stuff as clearly. So I think that's part of where this kind of pro stuff is leaning as well too. And I say not just us, I think everybody. It's like, it's a combination of like information that's deep and thought through, access to like the people whose brains are continually thinking about it. And then ultimately, I think it's also about like trying to open up people's minds so they feel like they have an understanding about the overall picture rather than just like the day-to-day kind of nitty-gritty. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And great value in all of that content. I mean, it's so hard to keep on top of this stuff. And you need to have experts that guide you and lead you, and those that you trust, which unfortunately, it's been tough to find people you trust in this space.
Well, that's a reputation, right? It's reputation. You got to earn it. And if you lose it, you're in trouble.
Totally. I want to also bring up your new podcast that you just launched recently. Yeah. Tell us about
AI for Humans is what it's called. Yeah. So AI for Humans is a podcast with my friend and I, Kevin Pereira, who's from my old G4 days. He and I have stayed buddies. And we're both just super fascinated with what's going on with generative AI. We actually launched a thing. So the quick story is last November, he and I were really getting into this space, and we went to an event in New York at Union Square Ventures called Promptopia, which was like the early days of like this kind of Gen AI world. And it was like,
Promptopia.
Yeah, exactly. It was like Stable Diffusion creators were there and a bunch of other people. And we were like, this is amazing. So we launched, it came out of that, threw together a startup called Prompto.com, which was like this really weird kind of game that we used Stable Diffusion to kind of create a game show sort of thing. You can, I think it's still live. You can go to promptogame.com. But out of that, everything was moving so fast, right? Like there was all these startups, people were getting funded, blah, blah, blah. We're like, what are we going to do? And we kind of like both were busy on other things. And then eventually we said like, well, what is our background? Our background is media, right? We make media. I've been making TV shows and digital media for 20 plus years. Kevin has hosted television shows for the last 15 plus years. We were like, let's just do a podcast about it. So we started doing a podcast, and what's been really fun is, and you'll appreciate this, is like, we are not the Bloomberg of podcasts. Like we are trying to have fun with this stuff. We come from a comedy background. We come from a place where we are creatives, and we're trying to see like, okay, well, how do you explain what's going on in this world to normal people? Because so many people hear this idea and they see like the Instagram guys, like you can make $1,000 a week with ChatGPT. Like that's not the good knowledge. The good knowledge is saying, okay, here's what's real. Here's what's happening, and here's what that means in human terms, and here's what it means to like understand AI right now. But then also like, here's the fun things you can go do with it. Like we always have a thing on our show where it's like, what dumb thing did you do with AI this week? And like I spent like 3+ hours trying to figure out how to make an NFL draft that was from other planets and aliens were involved. So I went through ChatGPT. I had it write like a script for me, because that's the amazing thing is like, I'm not a programmer, but you can have it write computer scripts. And I had to write a script that it helped to draft, and I used generated all these names and all this stuff. And like, that's all doable now. And you just have to understand how to talk to people and talk to things and make sure they get a sense of it. So we're really excited about it. We feel like this is our 4th show is coming up this week. And like every week we find weird, crazy stuff to do. And obviously, the amount of media that's happening around this space is bonkers right now, but we're trying to make something that's fun, able to watch for anybody. And also like, hopefully you'll take away a few information pieces from it too.
I love it. We need more simple AI access like that, because I think, like you said, we love it and we're excited and we could talk about it all day, but the majority, 90% of the population is like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand, right? So yeah, it's
and also it's scary, right? Like there's a story about like IBM's laying off 30% of its employees, you know what I mean? And they're saying it's directly due to AI, and it's like, holy shit. I know, it's a big thing, right? It's like crazy stuff. But like, so that's what, you try to like make it aware. My biggest goal with it is always like any transition in this space. And Jay, you know this because you've done this as well, but like there are opportunities everywhere along the way in emerging media and emerging tech as it changes, but you just have to change fast enough that you can see it. My big advice to everybody is always stay aware of what's happening, try things, do things, because you don't want to be the person that's a year, 2 years down the road. Like the fact that you're listening to this right now, whoever you are, you're smart, you're aware, you know that this is a thing. Great. Keep on it. Don't stop it, but also like keep looking at what's coming next, because that's how you keep yourself as a human adjustable and ready for whatever's coming after this.
Yeah. Fantastic advice. If you're here, like, something the rest of the world doesn't know. We're so early. It's such an important reminder, and there's going to be dips along the way. That's any new tech has massive cycles, and we're in the down of the cycle now, but it will come back. Okay, I want to wrap with a speed round. We like to just ask a couple of fun questions.
Sure.
Because we like to have fun here at Web3 Academy too. First question, what's an NFT you'll never sell?
Anonymize. I have my anonymized, and it's something where I have two of them, the two that I bought originally, and I bought one more. I just feel like it's part of it. Was my original PFP until I made my old Mint project, and now that's my PFP. But like anonymized is something I'll just hold on until if it goes to zero. It's the community has changed a lot over time, but it's still the home base for what I believe everything I learned about NFTs. So it'll be anonymous.
Okay. Cool. Something you purchased recently for under $100 that brings you joy.
Yeah, I'm really bad about this because I will not think enough about it. I also tend to buy things a lot of... Oh, you know what? I bought a new iPhone cord because I have two daughters that always steal my iPhone cord. So like knowing where an iPhone cord is at any given time, that's brought me a lot of joy because I always have been searching for it forever. Oh, one other thing, the similar sort of... My wife did this, but not me. We have two big dogs and they love to bark at the door. My office is like not very far away from the front door, and I would go crazy because 3 or 4 times a day, my younger dog, who's still a giant 90-pound like mix, would bark. And my wife bought a foldable gate to just stop them from going up to the window, and that's changed my life. So that's awesome.
Changed your life.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question, and no pressure on this one. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people were going to see, what would you write on it?
I think mine would be is like stay curious. Because I really, truly believe that is the heart of, it's funny because I think sometimes I'm a little in my head, but that is what drives me as a person is staying curious and asking questions about things I'm interested in. I believe that gives me motivation to live. And I think that if you stay curious and you learn about things you care about, that gives meaning to life. And I know that like, I'm not trying to downplay like relationships. I have an incredible family, all that stuff, but to me, the thing that drives me on a day-to-day basis is curiosity and what's happening and what's interesting that I can kind of turn myself on with. So like stay curious was always going to be my answer to that.
I love it. I love it. Spoken like a true nerd.
Exactly.
Find new things. Gavin, this has been a pleasure. Thanks so much for the time and sharing your knowledge and for giving us all a deep breath in this chaotic space that sometimes we lose ourselves in. It's a good reminder that we're all going to make it.
We're all going to make it, but stop using that phrase. It needs to be over. Yeah, but I'm saying in general, we got to be aware that like, okay, let's get a new phrase. Let's come up with a different phrase besides we're all going to make it at some point. But yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Jay. It's been awesome being here.
Thanks so much for listening, and everybody have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.